Good evening. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yankees Stadium. I don't think we need a roll call. I mean, we need it, but
Downtown Mayapack Properties withdrew for tonight. So Braymore at Carmel, 49 Seminary Hill Road. Mike?
Braemar is on for resolution. All my comments have been addressed.
Anthony, do you want to read in
Yes, we have.
anything from Rich?
We have two resolutions, Pat, prepared for the board.
Did Rich have any comments? Sorry. Did Rich have any comments? sorry, I
Rich
didn't
does
mean
have,
to interrupt you.
let me just, bear with me one second.
I don't have his. Should maybe be able to get it on here.
I do not have comments from Rich on Braemar.
Well, actually, my summary says Rich had no comments,
I have no
and Pat has an amended site plan and a resolution to be voted on.
Yep. Anything around the board?
Want to read it? Any questions from the board before Anthony reads in the resolution?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer the resolution of the Planning Board of the Town of Carmel, number 19-11, October 30th, 2019, tax map number 55.10-1-1, comma 3, Braemar at Carmel, secret determination of significance, negative declaration.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Jeff, they did a great job on this. This was really,
Yeah, I believe there's another
There is,
resolution.
There is.
there is a
There
final
is.
site plan resolution,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
any comments?
No.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll offer the resolution of the Planning Board of the Town of Carmel, number 19-12, October 30th, 2019, tax map number 55.10-1-1, comma 3, Braemar at Carmel, final site plan.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Jeff, it was a great project.
Okay.
Nice progress on this, a lot of good iterations. The team was a pleasure to work with.
Thank you, and thank you to the board for their insight on this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
We have a bond return at a public hearing. If we can move that up tonight, it shouldn't be long. I'm going to just jump ahead as a courtesy to people that are here. We have a public hearing for Melchor Site Plan 177 Bucks Hollow Road for a bond return. Anybody in the audience like to be heard on this bond return? Mike, comments?
All my comments have been addressed. I did an inspection of the site. There were no outstanding issues. I think Rich had the same.
Rich had no comments. If anyone from the board wants to be heard, if not, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman, as there do not appear to be any public comments, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
All in favor?
Aye.
And a motion to recommend bond return?
Is the town board.
I'll make that recommendation.
All
I'll
in
make that
favor?
recommendation. Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great night. Thank you.
Site plan, Joe Zachin, 14 Nicole Way, LLC, 14 Nicole Way. Mark is recusing himself. Mike, comments?
Detailed retaining walls required, I'm sorry, let me go to the beginning. The applicant amended his proposal to construct one building, parking, and outdoor storage on the corner of Nicole Way and Route 6 in Mayapack. Mayapack. A detailed retaining wall is required. Floor plans and elevations are required. I need them to confirm compliance with code. Landscape buffer plans are required, dumpster enclosure details required, provide lot width, lot depth. Got to actually draw the lines on the plat. You put numbers on there, but I do need the actual lines.
Do you have another set of plans for the other board?
Yes.
And I believe Pat has a memo, and Rich has some comments. Anthony, would you mind summarizing those, please?
Just fine. I didn't see a memo. I'm sorry.
You can read Rich's there.
Rich had no comments.
I don't have riches.
No comments
I don't
from, I'm
have
sorry, no
Rich's.
comments from Rich. Pat does, though.
Okay, the memos from the town planner, his comments are as follows. This two-building plan has been abandoned. The proposed plan depicts a single 60-foot by 90-foot, 5,400 square foot. The single building is located within the building envelope set back from Nicole Way, a distance of 41 feet. The building would house the Optimum Oil and Propane business operation, including 4 or 5 garage bays for oil delivery trucks, parts, and equipment storage, and a 1,400 square foot business office. The office will include a service counter where customers can pay bills. The building will be constructed of concrete and concrete block with a gable roof and oriented to face Route 6. In response to the evaluation of an alternate Route 6 driveway access, the current plan maintains the site access driveway off Nicole Way. The driveway is offset from Route 6 by 100 feet and is designed to accommodate unrestricted two-way ingress and egress. The new driveway accesses a reconfigured parking area for 11 vehicles located on the west side of the building. Access into the building via overhead garage doors and access to the outdoor storage area will remain on the east side of the proposed building. 2 optional employee parking spaces are noted in the northeast corner of the drive. The applicant has also submitted a project narrative describing the proposed operations of the facility. The following site plan revised comments are offered. 1, elevations and cross-sections of the new building as seen from Nicole Way are required. 2, a revised landscaping plan is required. 3, details of the on-site sanitary sewage disposal system are required. 4, the project narrative describes a stormwater management system consisting of catch basins and an on-site infiltration system. The stormwater plan should be illustrated on the site plan and details provided. Number 5, clarify the height of the PVC stockade fence on top of the retaining wall located around the outdoor storage area. Number 6, optional parking is not permitted. The spaces should be either be formally designated as off-street parking spaces or eliminated. Number 7, the suitability of the crushed stone portion of the parking and storage area requires review by the town engineer. It would appear logical to consider the stone within the outdoor storage area, but the area in front of that includes the optional parking and the dumpster enclosure would appear more suitably paved. Number 8, as opposed to the prior plan that prevented left turns out of the site onto Nicole Way, this plan allows this maneuver. The plan should indicate site distances to the south, and a sight line easement may be necessary to ensure that an unobstructed site distance is maintained. Number 9, the operational characteristics of the proposed facility as documented in the project narrative should be reviewed, and for those aspects that may result in adverse impacts, limitations or restrictions may be imposed as mitigation measures. That's all Pat had in his comments.
Thank you, Anthony. Would you like to speak on any of that?
Sure. Good evening. Al Capelli, project architect for Joe Zacon. The object of this evening's meeting, in all due respect to Mike and the planner, Pat, was not to do a full review. We know we need to do landscaping and drainage and everything that's required for the town. The idea was to present to you this reduced version of the plan. Again, 2 buildings down to 1 building, half of the parking, half of the building, 2/3 of the impervious, still coming off of Nicole Way. After presenting our previous application, after coming back 3 meetings ago with our preliminary concepts of driveways off of Route 6, and we were hoping to have some favorable input from you before we I don't want to say spend a considerable amount of money to cross the Ts and dot the Is that we know that you need for a full application. We don't want to do that a second time and be confronted with an obstacle saying, you're not coming off of Nicole Way, or whatever the comments may or may not be. This is the revised application, and, you know, we're looking for some input, good, bad, or indifferent from the board in what we're trying to do. We felt that we listened to you, the impacts. We're talking about 6 trucks leaving in the morning and 6 trucks coming in at night. It's a commercial zone, ladies and gentlemen. There can't be a lesser onerous use that can be put on a commercial site such as this. Residential neighborhood notwithstanding. Again, the amount of parking, the amount of traffic generated, the impact of the building, the users, nobody's going to be there during the day pretty much. 2 people are going to occupy the building. It's not a heavily used building. So we feel, and again, we've taken the other building totally out of the equation. And we're, you know, presenting this, again, in as reduced a version as can be. It's your, you know, it's your zone, it's your commercial zone. It's,
Comments from the board?
I think in the past, one of the biggest concerns was safety and exiting onto Route 6. So what have you done with this revised plan to make that a better situation?
nothing.
Okay.
Well, okay, let me go one step further. We approached the church, and we made an agreement with the church on the adjacent corner to control or have control of a site easement. So we've gone that far to do that. Previously, Mr. Zakon had contemplated doing whatever work was necessary to cut that hill down to make the site visibility a little bit better. He's cut his project in half. Why should he take that responsibility on him now? This is your intersection. It's a bad intersection by the town's doing, not by our doing. Our feeling is that 6 trucks exiting or entering on or off of Nicole Way in the morning and at night is not an adverse impact on the site. Again,
6 propane trucks
6, yes, that's
going
correct.
out in a, as you pointed out, a very bad intersection with visibility issues. It's not as benign as you might suggest.
Well, we showed you a proposal of access off of Route 6. Whether we developed the property or a shopping plaza occupied the building. And I think it was discussed that nobody wanted to see the series of retaining walls and the inundation of parking and everything else that went along with an access off of Route 6 on the east side of the property. I thought we came to that conclusion, and that's why we reverted back to this Nicole Way access.
I think the conclusion we came to that would be a large burden on your applicant to install the retaining walls. I don't think we ever got to the point that we looked at renderings or anything with the retaining wall, what it would look like. I think it was more on the applicant than it was on this board that fell apart, that proposal.
Well, I think part of the conversation also went to the fact that in order to, yes, it would be a burden economically on our client, undoubtedly.
I think
But is that what the town wants to see? Again, was that series of winding retaining walls, et cetera, just to get a building on the site, whether we developed it or whether it was developed by someone else. That's what you would see to gain access by virtue of the topography and where that access on Route 6 had to be. We feel that, again, the limited amount of traffic coming on and off Route 6 at Nicole Way there, we're not adding to that burden. That's,
my concern from day one, since I was there with Joe and Rich and several others in the state 2 months ago for probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes watching the cars come by. And I actually followed up again with a phone call to the Highway Department, Mike Simone, today. And I left him a voicemail saying, hey, look, I want to talk to you tonight, in preparation for tonight's meeting. I'm really losing sleep on this turn here. And he called me back and he says, your phone message hit the nail on the head that he's concerned about making lefts. As Anthony mentioned, our biggest concern is safety. We can talk about aesthetics of the building, we can talk about retaining walls, we can talk about the topography here. Our biggest concern from day one has been trucks coming out of there, crossing over the Route 6 and making a left-hand turn. And although the state was reluctant at first, when we walked, Mike Simone included, the Highway Department, down, pick a number, 100 yards, 200 yards, towards Carmel, it was a much better line of sight.
With no, without even looking at the gradient and the topography, that in my first 30 or 40 feet in that easterly corner there, I'm going up 20 feet in grade. What kind of, irregardless of the cost, you want to see the whole front of this property cut down, where I'm trying in this latest concept, I'm 60 feet off of Route 6. I'm keeping a natural buffer there. Gee, I thought we were doing a good thing by taking the parking from within 10 feet and developing all the way to Route 6 and moving everything further up, still within the envelope, and not developing anything. Blacktop within 60 feet of the property line, probably 70 feet plus to Route 6. Gee, I thought that was great. Keep the natural buffer there. Nobody's going to see the building by virtue of the topography and all the trees that are there. And we're saying that's not what we want to see.
You opened the meeting by saying, yes, it's a bad intersection. So why would this board add propane trucks crossing a bad intersection?
I have somewhat of a silly question. If it's such a bad intersection, why is there a left turn allowed there now?
That's just,
Shouldn't it be
it's a
right
state,
turn
it's a
only?
state road. I don't know, Mike, if you can answer anything to that. It's a state road. I wouldn't know.
There are a lot of intersections in this town that are not the best, but as a planning board, part of our job is to make sure that we don't make it worse. And I think that that's what we're trying to say here, is just, it's a bad intersection, should something be done? Yeah, but that's not our purview, that's the state. And we're just saying that we don't think making it worse is something that we should do.
If I may,
Sure.
my name is William Schilling, and I represent the applicant. The topic that has prevailed here is the intersection. But along the way, there were a lot of other comments made by consultants and by the board. This is a unique piece of property because it's a C zone, but it admittedly has access through what is a residential area. That in and of itself presented problems that this board raised frequently. It was talked about being perhaps too ambitious for a C zone. As Al suggested, there were two structures, there's now one. Issues such as parking, issues such as septic, lot disturbance were raised by your consultants and have been addressed by a very modified version that is here this evening, stormwater and visual impact to the residents above. So the focus on access is understood, but I would be happy to hear that this board recognized the efforts that the applicant made in addressing other issues that came up during this 10-month exercise where Mr. Zakon has been here 10 months, and during that time, he's paid over $60,000 for consultants and for engineers and for traffic studies. So I would prefer this evening if this board at least in part recognized the contribution or the compromise Mr. Zakon made in proposing a very, very modified site plan with a much less ambitious use than was before you before. Mr. Zakon heard your concerns, and he instructed Al to change everything to provide for what is the most passive C use in this zone. And as suggested by Al, buildings went from 2 to 1. The size of the building is just large enough so as not to have to go to the zoning board for area variances. Reduced parking, septic size, less lot disturbance, all these things are before you today. And so we're just requesting, A, that we take that step of recognition and that you realize that he's heard you, he's listened to you, he's trying to get some C use. As Al suggested, it's a C zone, and it's an existing pattern that exists now. Now, I don't think there's any prohibition to the board putting its thumbprint on a parking, or rather an access, that you would feel comfortable about. I don't think Mr. Zakon would necessarily object to no left turns or something like that. But I'm disturbed that, you know, as Al suggested, there's so many changes that he made just to accommodate this board and to move this project forward. And so we can talk about access, and we can talk about, you know, your concerns about the safety. It's your job, I understand that. But it's more than just the access that we should be talking about. We should be talking about the fact it is the most modest C use in your code. It's what, with all due respect, this board should want for that property. So, again, the applicant has come here in good faith and has modified that and downward modified that application considerably. And I wish you would take recognition of that. And then we can talk about perhaps stipulations about access, perhaps during a certain hour of the day that the board is concerned about. But I would like to take that first step and have you guys acknowledge the fact that he's trying to get there. We're trying to get there. And if you render this property unusable because of access, you're taking the property. There's got to be a use for this property. You zoned it C. The town of Quorum zoned it commercial, not us. And if you can find a better C use for this property, let me know about it, because I don't know where it is. So this is a first step, as Al suggested. We're ready to go forward. We're ready to listen to you about access. And just for the record, I did contact the church. They didn't turn me down. They didn't welcome me with open arms, but they said they'd consider. So again, the first step is to get rid of that two-building, busy site plan in a residential, in what is a residential access. We've modified it to accommodate your concerns. And now we're ready to go forward, and we'll talk to you about access. Whatever the consultants and the board members think, we'll do our best to implement it. But that's what I hoped we would accomplish this evening.
So, Bill, I appreciate that. I appreciate the time Joe spent on it. We certainly don't want to encourage you to increase the $60,000 to $90,000 and still not get the answer that you want someday. I don't know if you will or won't. I don't want to anticipate that. My biggest concern, I can speak for myself and I can speak for the highway department, when Mike and I spoke again today, and we were out there that day, and he said, please feel free to mention my name and tell him that I'm much more in favor of moving the entrance and exit down further so there's a much better path of line of sight, if you will. Same number one message, same number one priority that we mentioned, how many months ago, 6, 9, 10 months ago when we were out there. What I'm hesitant to do now, because of your statement, is we don't want to encourage the 60 to go to 90. I don't know if you'll get your answer you want, but I would suggest you focus on the safety, as Anthony and Ray mentioned, as a main priority. It was nice to go to 2 buildings to 1. We haven't even started looking at the buildings. We still haven't asked our architectural review council to look at it. But we would get to that point someday if we can work on this egress.
I think, and Al can speak to this better than I can, but I think the answer of access on Route 6 has been asked and answered in the negative. I think, am I not mistaken, that DOT or someone said it was an impossible?
Nothing is impossible, but the retaining wall.
Speaking to the, they won't be able to hear you on TV.
Nothing is impossible, but the retaining walls were 14 feet tall, if I'm not mistaken, across the entire property. It dropped the grade down. It was over $1 million in site work for a $300,000 project. It doesn't make financial sense to do that type of work for the minuscule use that I have of the property.
Okay, where was the access onto Nicole Way on the previous plan?
Same place.
Same spot, same location,
Same,
still with that
keeping it as
bend?
far away from the homeowners, from the residents
Far
as
from the
possible.
home. And line of sight, if you were to be entering the site, let's say exiting the site, looking left, what's the topography there?
The grade does go up. I don't know the exact numbers.
Right now, where the driveway is, you're right on grade, coming right off of Nicole. It's level grade coming in, and then she starts going up Nicole Way towards Katie's Court.
Okay, because I
She
think
comes
Pat
up-
referenced certain distances of
Yes.
line of sight there. And I think based on what that line of sight is, I think we need to weigh in, maybe via, and I'm not trying to add any cost to this, some other party, whether it's, if Nicole Way is a town road?
I believe so, Town Road.
So is that line of sight, as it exists, enough to safely to turn onto that road? I think that's something that we need to look at, that should not cost the applicant any money.
Rich should have an answer for that.
And maybe.
I'm pretty sure he does that part.
I'd like to ask that question to Rich and see what he has to say about it. We do appreciate the work you've done on it. We do want to see the property developed by all means. But we, as we've all said, have a responsibility for safety, and the nature of the type of vehicle going out there on top of just the traffic alone and blind spots is a concern. So maybe if we can work on that, that may be the way to go.
I think we certainly could do whatever we can to aid that on our property. So if any shaving has to be done on our property in order to gain visibility on Nicole Way, that's certainly within our, that's not unreasonable. Even the way we talked about it, and maybe we failed to put it on this particular sketch, that no left-hand turn for a truck, that's not unreasonable. We have no control over the intersection of Nicole Way and Route 6. We don't have any control over that.
Correct.
But if you
We
can-
can get an easement. There is an easement there that Mr. Schoen is trying to tie up. Who's gonna create that better visibility at that intersection? Again, at one time, Joe considered it. Again, he's not gonna do it at this point. So is it the town's responsibility? If Joe was to get an easement at his cost legally to the town for maintenance, would the town be willing to improve their intersection, not our intersection, your intersection, by shaving that hill down or do whatever's needed to make that intersection safer, forgetting about our 6 trucks. Everybody admits that that's the worst intersection in town supposedly, second to the one out here. But that being said, you guys, if we take you so far, you guys have to step up and contribute. You're making it safer for the whole town, for all the neighbors, forgetting about little Joe Zacon over here.
Just make sure you use the microphone, please.
I'm sorry?
He just told me, make sure you're speaking to the microphone, that's all.
Okay.
Sorry. Cameraman just texted me.
I think we need to follow up with Rich and Mike,
Yeah, and
so we can work. see what we can
one
do.
other thing also, and Anthony said it well, we really would like to see the property develop. We're just all about safety right now. Early on, we had the exit out of the property kind of shaped so you can only go right out of the
Yes.
property and not go up through Nicole Way. I understand that changed.
I didn't show it on this plan. We have no problem doing that. I don't think you have any problem not
Correct, I
going up.
have no issue whatsoever,
Coming
no
up to
left
Nicole.
on.
Yeah,
We
that's-
just talked
I don't
about, back
wanna
then,
go
I
up
think it
Nicole.
was, children going out, it's the time that kids start school, why put only
Again,
6
that's-
trucks up through the,
That's my
That's-
error in not
Okay,
showing
no.
it on this new cartoon that we're showing
Can you,
tonight.
would you please point out, even
What
even
I
for the
had-
public, what that would be?
Take the microphone with you, sir. He can't hear
Take the
you.
microphone. Yeah, that'll.
Sorry.
So I think what we had was a no left-hand turn out onto Nicole Way for his trucks,
Yeah.
period.
you could, Anthony, you could shape it, right? You could shape the
Absolutely, no,
road.
there would be, what we would do is put a curb there. We'd put probably a mountable curb, but there'd be a curb there directionally, forcing everybody
That's
to
what we
go
talked
right only out of the site. We talked about it, never got to this plan, again, my fault, but again, we have no problem with that. I'm here for the big picture. I take that as one of the little picture items, but I mean, again, I see it is an important feature, and that would be represented on a future site plan. But again, we don't want to keep on beating this up, and again, with Mike, we know lighting and landscaping and everything else, we know all that, but again, we don't want to do that and still have issues here.
Mike, what do you think? Joe works with yourself and Rich and see what we could come up with?
Yep, that'd be great.
Joe, that work for you? If maybe, as Anthony suggested, you work with Mike and Rich and town engineer to see how we can improve that line of sight and what the town can do and what you can do?
Just as a point of information, there is an easement, a subservient easement on the church property for grading and for things just like that. The dominant easement holder, the person has the right to enforce that, was the subdivision, which is now probably defunct. Question would be, would the dominant easement holder, the one that enforces the grading, would the town take on that responsibility? So in other words, along the edge of the church is an easement for grading.
State road.
But the easement for grading was given by the subdivision, the owners of the subdivision at the time of inception. The question is, A, would the church agree to the assignment of that easement, the dominant easement, to be the town, so that they could increase the site distance?
Well, I don't think we, as the planning board, can sit here and bind the town to.
I'm just telling you as point of
You know.
information, that's there. It is there.
I get it, but we can't answer you.
I
and tell you
didn't
whether the
expect
town
an
will
answer
agree to-
from
yeah.
you. I simply stated as a point of information.
Okay, but we were asked by the engineer or the architect whether the town would do it, and simply, we can't give you an answer. to
I
that.
understand.
I would imagine we would not do it adjacent to a state road, but I'm not giving a no. I'm just saying that's my understanding, is that they would not do that, which is the confusion, because it's
If,
town easement, state road.
Well, if it's such a perilous intersection, I would think the town may reconsider, or may consider taking it, but that's academic at
let's-
this point.
Work together and see if we can improve on a line of sight.
I mean, that hill's kind of overgrown now, Mike. So who maintains it now if the subdivision developer
Fully developed.
is no longer around? They developed it, they're gone, it's getting overgrown, perhaps making the intersection and visibility worse. Somebody should be maintaining it. I don't know who, I'm just talking out loud here. The church, the now defunct developer, the town, the state, who's responsible for
If
that?
it's in a state right-of-way, the state is responsible. If it's in a town right-of-way, the town is responsible. If it's on private property, the private property owner is responsible. That's what I'm saying. I can't tell you, because I don't know exactly, I can't see the map from here, so I don't know which property you're exactly talking about.
Some research.
Across the street? Is that the one across
Yes, on the
Nicole Way?
west, yes.
I'd have to take a look and see where the survey lines are. I don't know from here. They're not even on the map, right?
They're not on this map.
Correct.
They're on the existing, the as-built survey on another map, which you have, but it wasn't submitted this time around. That's fine. Okay. Okay.
Let's try to work together and see if we can figure something out.
All right, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My son just had it.
Longview School, 110 Scout Hill Road, site plan.
Craig, I'm going to recuse myself, continuing recusal.
Is Mark coming back?
I'm gonna text him.
I think Mark's gonna come back now.
I guess when he sees him walk out.
Bob, is Mark out there, please? Mike, your memo, please?
Yep, the applicant proposes to convert the existing one-family dwelling into a private school. This is a permitted conditional use as per the schedule of district regulations. The variance is required for lot frontage. In addition, it was brought to my attention that the right-of-way may not go all the way up to this property. If that is the case, they will need a 288 variance. If it does go up, then they need the variance for the number of feet, because they're deficient from the 100-foot requirement. The Highway Department told me that they stop approximately 100 feet before this driveway, but we're gonna clarify that. I think Peter has some information for us. The plat still says Phase 1 and Phase 2. I specifically asked for that to not be on the plat. If the pupils are playing outside the building or inside the building, it makes two totally different noises. It's very important that you clarify which one it's gonna be, because that's something that this board should really think about before granting this approval. They need a variance for parking. The school allows pupils of high school age. Furthermore, I am opposed to the granting of a variance if they're gonna just overload their parking and double park. Anything that would prohibit the emergency services from going into the property or getting in there is just something that I'm not in favor of, but that's, I would like to see more parking if possible. Oh, back to the previous one. Any reference to the phasing of construction has to be removed from the plat. It's not permitted in our code. And the educational institutions require parking, and it's not perfectly clear what it says, so they were challenging that. They were discussing going to the zoning board to discuss my interpretation of the code. I don't know if that's still what their intention is, but they do need a variance for parking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kim, do you want to read in?
I'll read Pat's. Pat's memo writes, site planning issues remain to be resolved. 1, the site plan has been revised to indicate all 55 required off-street parking spaces. The applicant contends that this number of spaces is unnecessary and is seeking a referral to the ZBA to allow for a portion of these spaces to be land banked or constructed on turf grass. The planning board should assess the suitability of this request before making the referral. 2, the applicant does not intend to construct the gym building at the present time, but instead is proposing to construct the gym's foundation only. At some time in the future, the gym building will be constructed. It is not clear how this approach addresses the board's policy to prevent phasing to occur. Clarification is necessary. 3, confirmation of the status of Scout Hill Road is required. 4, site access from the narrow driveway remains a concern. No comment from the fire department has yet been received, which is necessary to judge the suitability of the access way.
Thank you. Mike?
Okay.
Anthony, you want to read it?
I have a memo from our town engineer, from Rich. He goes on to cite the list of 21 documents that he's reviewed, and goes on to say the following. The proposed involves 2 phases. Phase 1, converting an existing residence to a school, widen the existing access drive, and add a handicap ramp. Phase 2, add a 40-foot by 100-foot structure to house a gym. Based upon our review of this submittal, the engineering department offers the following preliminary comments. 1, the following referrals would appear to be warranted. Mahopac Falls Fire Department. Applicant has acknowledged this comment and has submitted drawing and letter to the Mahopac Falls Volunteer Fire Department. 2, permits from the following would appear necessary. New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, coverage under general permit GP-0-15-002. Applicant has acknowledged this comment. Number 3, the area of disturbance for this work is 1.4 acres. The 1 acre disturbance exceeds the threshold criteria of disturbance for the New York State DEC stormwater regulations. This project requires coverage under the New York NYSEC SPDES general permit for stormwater discharges from construction activity, in parentheses GPO 15-002, and the development of stormwater pollution prevention plan that includes permanent stormwater controls. Review the review of the stormwater pollution prevention plan and associated details is ongoing, and comments will be provided to the applicant. The notice of intent must be signed and sealed. 4, the applicant has been required to supply a stormwater maintenance agreement and maintenance guarantee per town code 156-85 and 156-87B respectively, to assure long-term maintenance of all stormwater management practices proposed for the site. Applicant has acknowledged this comment. 5, should any public involvements be deemed necessary as part of the development of the track, a performance bond and associated engineering fee must eventually be established for the work. Applicant has acknowledged this comment and will submit estimate once seeker review is complete. And then Pat lists some detailed comments. Rich lists detailed comments. 1, all retaining walls greater than 6 feet must be certified by a New York State licensed structural engineer. Applicant has noted this comment. 2, access of fire department around the rear of the building must be considered. Applicant has noted this comment and is working with the Mapac Falls Volunteer Department, Fire Department. 3, it is unclear as this property is serviced by a private road. The applicant has stated that they have reviewed tax records. However, the applicant will need verifying and provide a title search regarding ownership of this road. There are concerns with the following: maintenance for the private road, if agreement are in place with shared driveway owners. Is it unclear if a 271A variance is in place for these residents, and access driveway road not being up to town code? That ends Rich's comments.
Thank you, Anthony.
If I may comment, Peter Scott, architect and engineer for the applicant. So basically, we submitted everything for stormwater management review, including a SWIP, stormwater management, everything submitted. And what we do normally is we file an NOI with the DEC after review by the local authority. We've already submitted everything to DEC, and we have comment letters about required permits, and all the endangered species items are addressed. There are none. No wetlands on the property, et cetera. Number 2 is, the intent of the project is to remodel the existing home into a school and add a gym. But in terms of movement and creating this environment for the children, we are hoping we could start with the building and then put the gym up. We are aware of the fact of phasing and the issue with the town. One way we could do it is we could just go for a building permit when we get the when we get site plan approval. We take a building permit out, we do all the improvements. We apply to the building department for a CO on the existing building, and we've got 2 years to get a CO on the gym. Our issue is we're hoping that we can at least get occupancy of the big building and all the classrooms. Again, the gym is ancillary. I'd hate to hold up the use of the school pending the construction of this gym, but we can do a couple things. We can bond it. We can actually build it, but to be candid with the board, we're going to apply for a CO once we get the school going anyway and do all the site improvements as required. But again, we may not have a CO on the building, but on the gym, but we're definitely pushing for a CO on the school itself. It's a prudent path to be taken because of it's based on economics and some time issues. But speaking with the client tonight, basically, if the town says we have to build everything all at the same time, we would agree to do that, and then work it out with the building department in some manner at a later date. That's the only reason why we bring up how we're going to address the gym itself.
Most of the issues I've heard so far tonight and over previous meetings have been traffic, the increased traffic flow substantially, the narrow roads, very secluded, I've driven up there, very secluded neighborhood. Steep hill. Those are some major hurdles you need to explain to us, how that's gonna be managed, if that can be managed. Do we have, Mike, do we have a detailed traffic study?
We did an ITE analysis, basically. We looked at the, we didn't take counts, but we took the ITE and we analyzed proposed traffic, existing traffic, combined the two together with a full occupancy. We only have 50, we have limited, 50 children. We use buses, and we think we have 14 teachers, I think. So when you run all the numbers, we're still at level A for the roadway. We're running at level A. It's not overtaxed.
Yeah, you're talking about roads that probably get 5 cars a
Pretty
week.
much.
I'm exaggerating,
That's right.
but, you know.
And what we did do is we went back into the archives, and we dug up the plat map from 1949, which was filed. We also pulled out every single deed on all the properties that are in this
Peter.
one area in question.
You gotta use the microphone, I'm sorry. They can't hear you if you walk away.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So we basically looked at every single deed on the properties which are along the Scout Hill Road environment, and in every single one of the deeds does not indicate any.
Where's your
private
building,
road.
where's your building on that?
We're at the end, we're
Okay, right there.
We're at the end. So this is a full filed map with town roads. There's no easements or anything listed on any of the deeds. The title companies would be nervous if they missed something, but I don't think they did. In addition, in 2005, a subdivision was approved right here on this project, utilizing Scout Hill Road as a town road. That was right here through an easement through old lot number 3. So there's been activity in the past and the record, both in the deeds, individual deeds for the homeowners, and the deed for the filing of the map indicated it's a town road for its entirety. It's 50 feet wide, and that's basically, you know, if a town owns the land, we can't improve it because it's town land, and there's no indication in any manner, shape, or form that this isn't a town road. So that issue is pretty much off the table from the records that we pulled out.
We need clarification now.
Pardon me?
We need that to be clarified, though. We need to make sure, Mike Simone says that they stop X amount of feet before, and I don't know the exact number, but we need to clarify that. That
What
needs
was it,
to-
what was it that you looked at? Just the deeds to those specific properties, or you did a chain of title search on any of those properties?
What we did is a lot of them reference the 1949 drawing. In fact, all these, all but one did not reference the 1949 plat map. That was referencing a map filed in this, before this board in 2005 for a subdivision.
Okay.
So all those basically had no reference to any easements or any form of responsibility for these homeowners to maintain something. And again, the meets and bounds are clearly filed in a map in 1949, that it's all within town roads. Now, regardless of, you know, I don't know, some statement
before they
made
built
is
it.
that the road ended at a certain location, but no one improved it. It's always been improved in its current form.
But if it was never dedicated to the town of Carmel and improved, it's not a town road, and that's all that Mike Simone was saying.
Right.
Okay, just, that's why we're trying to figure this out. It's not a no, it's a, just show us why or how, because that's before they built the roads, that subdivision map.
Yes,
That's a proposal that they want to do, so obviously the roads weren't there then, we know that. So if they didn't build them, they could never have been dedicated, that's all.
I somewhat agree with you, but we have COs on houses up and down the street with building permits issued as late as, this CO was granted in 2014. So basically, there's a lot of history of it being deemed acceptable as providing access. And so that's kind of the basis of our approach with the board. We're more than happy to work with it in any manner we can, but again, the documentation we see has a pretty clear description of who owns it.
And that CO was issued by me. And the map in my office for the roads shows that the town road goes to there. But if the highway department says it doesn't, that's why there's a question, and we just wanted to find out why. But I am the one that did that CO for the house.
So beyond all that, because we want to work together as much as we can, what we're here for is, again, there's really nothing I can address with the memos, because everything's been submitted. And what we're hoping to do is get a referral potentially to the ZBA. So what is the concept? The concept with the ZBA is that we've shown to you a map. Sorry. We submitted complete documentation where we meet the requirements of the town. We're fully compliant with your parking regulations and in the development of the site. And stormwater management and everything else is fully compliant with the DEC regs. We're exempt from DEP because we're outside the watershed. But when you look at the parking requirements, we have shown that we can create all the parking is required. We're hoping to get to the ZBA and do land banking. And what is land banking anyway? Well, land banking is a new concept which is being accepted by many municipalities where we'll grade the site, we'll get it all ready to go, but we won't have pavement there, we'll have grass. And we use something called turf grass in an overflow condition. It looks like a site, it looks like a parking spot, but it's green. And those are being more and more acceptable because, like any other use, we have peak periods of use, and a lot of times it remains vacant. And to reduce our footprint, carbon and otherwise, we have been successfully utilizing this land bank. And so our details include some turf grass, and we are proposing a couple areas for that. We were hoping to put 12 of the spaces here as turf grass because we didn't want all the parking in the front of the property, but it all works. It'll be graded and ready to be used, but we're hoping it can be grass. And that's what we want to go to the ZBA for. We're also looking for potential land banking on this area as well, but again, we have a fully compliant site plan. We're just trying to reduce some of the carbon footprint on the site.
But, excuse me, we still don't agree on the parking calculation either.
No, we're full 55. We're meeting.
Oh, you went to what I,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry.
Our sites are fully compliant
Sorry,
with the number of parking spaces.
So you don't have paved to comply, but you do have the spots, just not paved.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
Right now, we
Apologize.
presented a fully paved project with 55 parking spots, and our drainage is accordingly of that form.
And that's based on the parking that I discussed with
your
the, okay,
count.
sorry, I did not
Yes,
see that on the
We're
plan.
following his count. And then all we want to do is go
I
to the
didn't see that.
ZBA and see if we can reduce that in some manner. But again, it's fully compliant with Mike's count and his interpretation. So if we didn't go to ZBA, basically we'd be building the entire site as you see here. And the stormwater works for everything. It's fully compliant. So that's the only, and then we have another variance requirement is because our lot doesn't have 100-foot frontage. When it was subdivided and approved for this project, they didn't give it 100 foot of frontage. I don't know why, but that's how the lot was created. And we need to get a variance for that. 2 variances.
In one of the memos, it mentions that you're in touch, you had the fire department notified about this project. What's the
I
feed?
met with the fire department twice.
What's the
I submitted all
feedback?
the documents to them twice. I've never gotten a response back. I wrote in desperation in one of my response memos that maybe the town can help me out getting a hold of someone. but I physically have been there. I presented the plans to them. I did put a fire tank in there that we discussed verbally. There's a fire tank on the property. It's right over here, as they requested, but I can't get a piece of paper. at the
Give me a
end.
call tomorrow, I can contact somebody.
I did this in June.
I think that's an important,
Yeah, I did it in June. They said at the time,
Because
they
of
had
the
no
no.
impact. They wanted a fire tank. We gave them all the calcs, fully compliant. It's on the drawing.
Mike might be able to help you out with that.
So you're fully compliant, except you need a variance for frontage,
Frontage.
parking on grass, and that's it?
That's it.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get this.
Yes. And I have the section of the codes with me
That's fine.
for that. So that's what we're hoping we can get referred to. And again, I'm waiting for the final engineering review of all the stormwater drainage and the full SWIP. If it's approved locally, we're ready to, we have an NOI, all the forms are in the package for you. We just file it as a NOI with the DEC, and that's extended.
Comments from anybody on the board?
My comment's based on Pat's memo. The fact that this is a narrow driveway. At the beginning of the driveway, it's the most narrowest point. Why is that?
What we're doing is, the existing road is really narrow, but we're making it 26 feet wide once it enters onto our property. So everything on our site is 26 feet wide. The issue is
Even at that turn?
Pardon me?
Right at that turn, or am I
Yes.
reading it wrong?
No, starting here, there's a phantom line where it exists now.
That's what I'm saying.
Everything becomes 26 feet wide. This new line on our site plan depicts the new width.
Okay,
Everything's fully compliant, 26 feet wide.
thank you.
And extends throughout the entire property. We can't improve this if we don't own it.
You can with permission from highway.
Yes, only if you say,
Just want to make sure that you,
yeah.
if you get permission, you're allowed to improve it on highways property.
There are probably 2.5 pages of comments here that
There's no
you've
comments?
heard tonight from Mike and Pat and Rich.
There's no comments on that piece of paper. None. Oh, which one's that one?
My information I'm working off of,
Oh, we took care of all.
right? That has a consultant, has Mike's feedback, has Pat's feedback, Rich's questions and so on. Most of them you've heard tonight about
Yes.
whether it's narrow roads or steep hills or fire departments. I don't want to slow you down, but I don't think we passed on too many projects with 2.5 pages to the zone board. I'd like to just, hear me out, 2 weeks possibly, we'll be having another meeting in 2 weeks. I'd like to at least see one more turn of the crank with this, that you work with the consultants and possibly get on the agenda in 2 weeks from now. And I think it'd be a lot more, because I'm concerned with the fire department. I personally like to, Mike volunteered for you to give him a call tomorrow. I think that could be a showstopper if the fire department's against this. They don't feel it's safe or adequate. So that's,
Especially with
my-
children back there,
yeah.
you know.
I'd like
the
to find
access
out
to
if
it.
they have the frontage, so either they need a 280A or the number, because if you have it, it's fine, you know what I mean? But if you
Yes.
don't, let's get the 280A, this way you're done, you know what I mean? You don't have to keep jumping back and forth.
And we meet every 2 weeks. It's not like we're gonna see you after the holidays or something like that.
Yes.
We could see you in 2 weeks and,
Because in terms of our submission, we can't submit, there's nothing else I can submit. I'm waiting for the fire department. I'm waiting to see if it's a private road or a town.
and you can meet with the consultants, and the next time we're looking at preparation for the meeting, we won't have all these to-dos.
Rich's first 5 comments state that it's been acknowledged by you, that the applicant is. And then his detailed comments, which there were 3 of them, a few we may want
Retaining
to,
wall, I'm a PE structural engineer.
you may want to just start, just have your responses.
There's nothing I can do, it's all basically.
Until it's done. He's saying at the end, he wants him to certify the walls,
Yes.
after it's built, not before.
And Mike, if this in 2 weeks does go to the zoning board, it comes back to us, right? Because we're gonna have to have a public hearing, or it would come back to us, correct?
You mean,
This applicant.
once it goes to zoning, if it gets the variances, it comes back to you, then you have a public hearing,
That's
and
my
then it
point,
moves
right.
forward, yes.
Because I know the public has a lot of concerns about this.
Yes. They would end up with 2 public hearings.
Okay.
One here and one at zoning.
My recommendation is to come back in 2 weeks. I don't know, board, if you agree with that?
I agree.
I agree. I think
Sure.
I really hope that you
don't move forward with what you're asking, and instead you let us go to the zoning board of appeals. We have come back having addressed every comment that we've been able to address. The lack of ability, the lack of response from the fire department isn't something, and we've mentioned that at every single one of the meetings we've requested in the past that the town help us with that. It's great, Mr. Carnazza is gonna help us with it now, but we've asked that meeting after meeting. We have addressed all the comments. We came back with a fully compliant proposal, and if the zoning board of appeals approves the variances or not, either way, we'll come back in front of you. It won't slow us down from addressing any of your comments, but a school runs on a calendar, and for us to be able to make this work, we need to be in that building by the fall of 2020. And that's going to require a great deal of work, because we want to make sure it's completely up to code. It crosses every T and dots every I. So I don't think you give up anything by allowing us to go to the zoning board of appeals now, and we still come back in front of you. And if in any way we haven't satisfied you, then you should absolutely not approve us. But we have done everything. With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, and the last time we were here, you said something very similar about, we could come back in 2 weeks, and it took 4 because we had to make a resubmission, and then it got delayed another 2 weeks because of meeting changes. And this, really, we have done everything we can to be as compliant and responsive to absolutely every single comment that you've made, and we will continue to do that. But we really respectfully request that you allow us to go to the zoning board of appeals as we continue to meet every one of the comments that you asked us.
Mike, how are you on your comments? And you had several, but how satisfied are you now with the parking and items you
For the
mentioned?
parking, he complied with what we discussed, but they need to do the non-improved parking for some of their spots, as you know.
It's just a request. We can build it if we have to.
No, Tom, just, if you get the variance, you can do what you have to do, but, maybe losing my train of thought there. 288 versus 57 feet of frontage is the only outstanding issue, and I don't know how to answer that until we get some clarification on who owns that piece of land directly adjacent to the front of their property. It's either a number or a 288. If it's 0, then it's 288.
We have brought with us, as we showed you, the initial information, which all points to the fact that it's a public road, and are in no way resistant to providing all of the information and pursuing it just as Mr. Carnazza has requested. So we came ready to address that comment. We will come back to you after, if you would grant us going to the zoning board of appeals with all of the information you're asking about that particular issue as well. So we're fully moving forward and addressing it. We brought everything that we could possibly bring, and we will bring exactly what Mr. Carnazza is looking for in terms of determining which it is.
The problem is what you brought is a proposal, okay? That's saying that we're going to build this road in this spot. Doesn't say they built the road in that spot and dedicated it to the town of Carmel. And that's the entire question.
No, I understand.
Because we had this several times up in Rolling Greens. Remember all these houses, they were trying to build on roads that were, on paper, they were there, but they're not there. And they were never dedicated to the town, so therefore it's not adjacent to a town road. And that's what the 288 is for.
I understand what you're saying. I just want to add one additional piece to that. Is in addition, we brought copies of all of the deeds which reference the property, the areas that the properties extend to, and they show that they do not extend on either side to this road area. So that is information completely consistent with it being a town road. And again, not to say that we won't also bring the information you're asking for, but we did more than just bring a map with a proposed road. We brought copies of the deeds of all the property which specify the extent of the property, showing that the extent of the property ends at the numbered plot lines and do not extend into the area which is the proposed road. And nobody else owns it, and it must be owned by the town.
That's not true.
I think that really is buttressing Mike's point. You're the properties are in line with the map you showed us, which shows the road, but all Mike is saying is, he doesn't know if that official transfer to the town ever occurred.
And that's what 288 is.
Right. So when a developer cut up the property, he drew the road, the property lines ended the road, but there's still the unanswered question of whether that was ever dedicated to the town.
Developed and dedicated, it's what it would require it to be.
We have all these COs for all these properties.
Agreed, and I did one of them, and I told you why. There's a line that shows that the town road goes there, but the highway superintendent is the one that said that it does not, and that's why it's in the air right now, and that's why I called, I don't know who I called today, I spoke to somebody about it and said, if you have any information and you can get it to me, please do. Trying.
Peter, that's a significant issue. So 2 weeks back before this planning board to resolve that issue clears the way for the ZBA and doesn't cause you to be ping-ponged to a board that only meets once a month.
Well, the ZBA is moved their meeting up.
Because of Thanksgiving.
And the deadline for submission to the meeting is tomorrow. And so I go for 2 weeks, I miss.
The deadline is tomorrow.
Correct.
So would you include a 288 variance in the deadline tomorrow if you were going to put it in?
If I had to, I would probably. Yeah, we could do that, the ZBA, if we had to. Because our issue is, they won't meet till January then. We're not out until January.
No, we meet in December.
December?
Sure. Sure, at the moment, there's no discussion, well, that I'm aware of. They did not say that they were not having a December meeting.
And pushing that meeting off, though, until even going to the December meeting, it makes it potentially problematic for us to complete the project. So, again, we're not gonna slow down getting you all of that information and complying, but we really would like to be able to go in front of the ZBA for these issues, which we've been here before talking about, so we can come back to the planning board with the clear resolution of the highway issue as well.
How long does it
Let me
take?
just-
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, Mike.
How long does it take to actually get a search of that piece of property in front of you to find out? Could you do it before the agenda?
Oh, yeah, I have a title search. We have a title company. We have all the addresses. It's just a discussion.
So, I mean, if it's not proper, we'll pull you off the, I'll pull you off the agenda. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but that's up to the board if they feel comfortable. I'm not trying to.
Well, since Kim's reading in Pat's and Anthony's reading in Rich's, I'd just like to get their opinions. I'd like to ask what you're thinking, Kim. You have Pat's memo in front of you.
So my opinion, based on Pat's memos, is that item 4, which I mentioned, the roadway, the fire department, I would be more comfortable waiting to hear what Mike finds out from the fire department first. I don't feel that us sending this to ZBA with a lot of these loose ends, not cleared up, is a good idea for us as a board. We usually will send people to zoning board when we have the least amount of issues. And the fire department, to me, is something important because you're dealing with a remote area that we need to make sure that the road is the way it should be for them to get back there.
And it sounds to me like there's really one issue that we have the possibility of addressing, and another issue that a local volunteer fire department has not been responsible in responding to, because.
Well, that's where we're gonna help you out, and Mike's gonna reach out to them for you. The other thing is, we need to clarify what's going on with the road.
I agree. With those 2 points, I would not feel comfortable sending this to the ZBA. And we understand your situation, but
It's a tough spot.
I understand the frustration.
There's a lot of questions because it's a tough spot where you're trying to do this, so, thank you for understanding. Thank you.
You'll call me tomorrow.
I think those are important in the phasing right now.
Gateway Summit Senior Housing, extension of final amended site plan. Mike, I don't believe you had any comments on this.
I do
correct?
not. This is on for a re-grant of approval.
And,
Oh, I'm sorry, extension, not a re-grant.
And I know Pat had no comments. Anthony, would you mind reading in Rich's, please?
certainly, this regarding Lot 6. The engineering department has no objection to re-granting the site plan approval for this project, as there are no changes to the site plan being made. The following should be noted. Putnam County Department of Health requirements. The PCDOH approved the wastewater collection system plans, and they are valid until October 23rd, 2022. October 23rd, 2022. New York City Department of Environmental Protection requirements. The New York City DEP approved the stormwater pollution prevention plan for this project on August 21st, 2007. The New York City DEP provided a conditional extension to the August 21st, 2007 SWIP on October 29th, 2012. The conditions of the SWIP are now, The conditions of the SWIP are now set to expire on August 28th, 2022. New York City DEP approved an extension of the design approval on May 13th, 2010. The permit is set to expire on October 30th, 2024. New York State Department of Environmental Conservation requirements. The New York State DEC approved an extension wetlands permit is set to expire on March 3rd, 2020. The New York State DEC granted a stormwater permit on June 18th, 2007. According to the New York State DEC website, this permit is still in effect. New York State DEC updated the general stormwater permit in 2015, GP-0-15-002. Per the New York State DEC, if a project was approved under earlier version of the general stormwater permit and is being built under an updated version of a general stormwater permit, the applicant does not need to meet the updated technical criteria, only ministerial criteria. I trust that this is adequate for the board. Do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions.
Thank you, Anthony. So I guess the obvious question, Jeff, is this been kicking around since at least 2007? When?
It's the same answer, you know, the market continues to work against senior housing projects in the town of Carmel. I should say market rate senior housing projects. We do have a subsidized affordable senior housing project in construction right now, but the market rate stuff has market forces working against it, and the applicant continues to be committed to the project, invest money in the project. And just for the record, this is an extension of approval, not the re-grant of approval. We did get a re-grant of approval a year ago, and within that approval resolution, there is a provision to come back for a one-year extension, and that's what they're seeking this evening.
So, with the senior housing that's already underway, as you're aware, this would make this project even more difficult to start someday.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, you're saying there's really no market right now for senior.
Well, the market, really what it comes down to is the business side of it, right? The marketing, as a market rate project, right now, the financing and related forces you need to get a project started really doesn't have the confidence in a senior-only townhome, multifamily housing project in the town of Carmel. That's the fact, and that's been the fact.
Any questions from anyone? Can I have a motion?
This is a one-year
One year.
extension, just to be clear.
All right, I'll make a motion to grant a one-year extension of the final amended site plan for Gateway Summit Senior Housing Lot 6, Gateway Drive.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Fairway Senior Housing Lot 7, Gateway Drive. Mike?
Same comments. I think Rich's are gonna be the same, basic, too.
Pat had no comments, and Rich's,
Rich's comments are the same. The permits and the dates are all the same.
any questions from the board? If not, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to grant a one-year extension of the final amended site plan for the Fairway Senior Housing Lot 7, Gateway Drive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Jeff. Good night. We're gonna move the minutes to the end of the meeting. and Centennial came off tonight. So, Homeland Towers, Lake Cassie, 254 Croton Falls Road. Just not sure how long this meeting's gonna take, so. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Robert Codioso, with the law firm of Snyder and Snyder on behalf of the applicants.
Okay, and this is a public hearing tonight. Mike?
Just an update, the zoning board of appeals denied the variances required last Thursday night. Variances that were required for the height of the tower, the driveway, and the maximum fence height. All three were denied by the board.
Okay. And do you have any comments? You have a resolution in front of you, right?
Rich didn't have, I don't believe we had any comments from the town engineer. Pat has prepared a resolution.
Okay, now this is a public hearing. We do plan to take action tonight. We'd like to close the public hearing. Any comments from the public that would like to be heard tonight that haven't already been heard, or you feel you'd like to mention them again? Please, you got to use the microphone. Please.
I'm Gail Fierro, 308 Croton Falls Road. And we had an issue with one of the applications. We have two historical properties that have been recognized, and they're well on their way to being on the agenda. And can I give you something?
Thank you. We can share.
Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to let you know that I provided a copy of what was submitted to the board to Mr. Gaudioso for his review.
Thank you.
I'm referencing the most recent letters to the planning board from EBI and Saratoga Associates, particularly their view images and the assessments of our two historical structures, which are number 294 Croton Falls Road, called the Fountain House, and the second one is the Well House. And I've come to the following conclusions, reading everything in depth. The picture submitted of the beginning of 292 Croton Falls Road driveway, they state that the view shed mapping shows that if any views exist to the proposed tower, it will be obscured since there is a 1,400 feet intervening distance of the proposed tower. And our historical structures are approximately 700 to 800 feet away from the tower, and it is in view of it. They're documenting the 1,400 feet in that particular picture, which is incorrect in relation to the historic site. We have to remember here that these historic structures are our focus of concern against this tower. Not what you cannot see, and you can, most certainly can see the tower from these structures during every season. Next, they show a line of sight profile for the Fountain House, which is number 294, and they label incorrectly as number 292. The well house is quite a distance further back, even closer to the tower. This clearly contradicts and proves wrong the 1,400-foot view theory in concept and what you cannot see from the beginning of the driveway. Regarding EBA's letter to PBA regarding notifying the public letters, they stated that they sent a letter to the Putnam Valley Historical Society, and they did not respond. So why did they not send a letter to our Carmel Mayapack Historical Society office, since they were the ones who knew deeply about our historical nature of the property? EBI stated that there's no requirement to send letters to neighboring property owners, and I understand this, but that's one of my points. If they had sent one to our local historical office and not Putnam Valley, then our Mayapack Carmel local historically related interested people involved with that association, they would definitely have notified my family, because they've always called me over the past 25 years that they wanted to come and walk the property and they wanted more and more information. The EBI letter has many contradictory statements, examples I've marked my observations and marked them accordingly in the pages you see attached. Just an example, one paragraph they say that Mr. Allen ran modeling that utilizes the proposed tower's height and location, as well as ground elevation and ground cover, height data to predict areas where there is a potential for visibility of the tower. It is important to understand that the modeling indicates area of potential visibility, and this is what they say, whether the top of the 1 inch or the top of 139 feet are potentially visible. So what are they saying here? It could be an inch, it could be 139 feet. For this modeling, the areas shaded in green, they say, are areas where they can see it. So the other thing was, then they go on to say the view shed mapping indicates that neither of the two resources nor their immediate surroundings will have views of the tower. So they're saying it's contradictory. And the vegetative cover is thick and substantial, and even though deciduous in nature, the dense enough to completely screen views of the tower and the two newly identified resources. So they're skipping all over here. The viewshed mapping predicts that there may be views of the proposed facility along the shared driveway. However, the Google Street View shows the arching trees, and that's where they showed the picture of the 1,400 feet away. So it's like a lot of smoke and mirrors. Then they say the well house is 850 feet, and the Richard Yates Cottage is 985, it's less than that. And then again, they go on to say neither resource will have views, but in the other ones, they say it could have 1 inch, it could have 100. So, you know, and another sheet, this is page 83 on description of existing visual environment. Where it says here suburban residential, they marked that it's within 1 mile, the view. It's not, that's wrong. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. And they could have marked that it's within a quarter of a mile, which it is, the residential property, because a quarter of a mile is 1,320 feet. My house is 479 or 97 feet, and our historical properties are less than that, or are less than the 1320, which is a quarter of a mile, so, but they didn't mark a quarter of a mile, they marked that it's within 1 mile, which is not correct. And number 7, the situation or activity in which the viewers are engaged while viewing the proposed action. And they actually do put daily travel to and from work, involved in recreational activities, routine travel by residents, at a residence, at a work site. That's a daily thing. And even Richard Yates' daughter is backing this. She's very happy about it becoming a historical property. And even though we were such a private family before, we, I guess, are forced into now to fight this tower. So I will welcome people at that point sometimes if they want to see it. Then the other page of this, it says, a site or structure listed on the National or State Register of Historic Places. They put just the well house, and they omitted the fountain house where Yates lived, which is number 294. They omitted that. And this is the picture of the driveway. I put a lot of these pictures here. And then also, I have a question. These are reasons for denial. It's that the applicant must justify for the proposed site all of these factors. And the applicant must also document the hardship incurred if the permit were not granted. Did any of these applicants really give a hardship? This is a law that is on here that they're supposed to say what their hardships are. That's a reason for denial. And the conflict with the historical nature is a reason for denial. I think that's it. But I think that's enough of smoke and mirrors.
Please state your name.
Bryce Fierro. I live on the, as aforementioned property that my mother was just speaking about, and thank you for letting me speak tonight again. Homeland Towers has proposed a number of tower design options. We oppose to all these designs and submit that none of these proposed designs meet the standard under the town and New York State Code to minimize the negative impact on a historical and/or scenic resources. Also, these designs violate the conditions under the town code in many respects and have been determined by SHPO to have an adverse effect upon historical receptors. We request that before taking a decision on the application before you to reflect upon the effort put forth by this community and its steadfast opposition. We are your neighbors, friends, and colleagues. We know that you share the same love and affection for our community as we do. We offer to you our sincerest thanks and appreciation for all the work you have put into this long process. As a community, we've done everything we can to support you and let you know our feelings. We have attorneys involved in opposition to this application. Many hours have been spent carefully examining court decisions, media reports, and other resources. Our special counsel has stated that this board has more than enough information to deny this application. The board can feel confident that a denial is rationally based. We respectfully request that this board exercise their discretion in favor of this community in denial of this application. Finally, we ask the board to consider the entirety of the record before making its decision. Please consider the following from Homeland: contradictions, misstatements, misapplications of the law, and omissions. These actions make it impossible for a community and for the board to move forward in good faith. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else has something new they want to?
Good evening, Andrew Campanelli, Campanelli Associates, PC, 1757 Merrick Avenue, Suite 204. On behalf of the residents, Mr. Chairman, I've submitted my comments in writing. I really have nothing further to add at this time. I would simply ask if the board would grant me the courtesy of reserving 120 seconds, just 2 minutes, after Mr. Gaudioso puts on his presentation, which he appears prepared to do, so that I'm able to protect the record. So it'll be possible to reserve a simple 2 minutes, no longer.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, member of the boards, I'm going to be real brief. Our attorney has said it all. It's all for the record. I just want to say one more thing that I think should be clear. I saw some of the pictures on the submittals on the page today. I reviewed the backup documents, and I had submitted a while back some pictures to this board, so I know you submitted the pictures I sent you to the board, right? So they're on record. I just want to be clear about one thing. There's no question, and I'm talking about 254 Croton Falls Road. I live on Eleanor Drive. I think from a visual impact, Eleanor Drive is the most severely impacted with the direct view. We don't look from the ground up at it. We look either even at it, right at about 600 feet where they're at, or where some of us are higher and looking down at it. So I took pictures at the 140, the 160, the 180, and my pictures are very real. And this thing stands up like a real sore thumb. I didn't see one of their pictures that honestly showed how it looks from Eleanor Drive. So I speak to all my neighbors up there. I told them I'd be here, I'd speak on their behalf. Eleanor Drive is severely impacted by this visual monster that will not be above us. It will be either equal to us, or in some cases, when I'm at the top of my driveway, I have to look down. As I pull down my driveway, I'll look at the cell tower directly behind my house. And some people have beautiful bay windows, and it's just going to be sticking up. So keep in mind, your house is here, there's a valley here, and the cell tower that's proposed here, and it sticks right up in the middle of the sky. It's absolutely horrible. I believe it'll have a negative impact on the resale value of my home. I think that's been documented. But more importantly, for us on that block every day to have to visually look at that, it's going to have an adverse impact on us. I'm not going to get into all the other issues. I know our attorney put them in writing, and I'll just say that for the record, that you have the pictures. Those are real pictures, and they weren't taken from behind cars or behind trees or make them look worse than they are. They're real pictures, and it's a real negative impact for us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
George Fierro, 308 Croton Falls Road. What I'd like to ask the board is at Peckham, you have a tower there, which is probably a quarter mile from where this tower wants to be placed. How come they don't go to Peckham?
There's 2 towers up there, by the way.
That's correct.
There's 2.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Mr. Guardioso, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, as a matter of housekeeping, I've asked for these in the past, but I'll ask again. Copies of anything that was submitted to the record, including what was just submitted tonight. If the board, in fact, is relying on any of these documents, which we haven't seen, and quite frankly, a lot of our materials go back to August of last year, 2018. So I'm a little bit perplexed why there were comments regarding documents that were submitted back then. But going back to the issue of SHPO, there was a statement by Mr. Bryce Fierro that SHPO had issued an adverse effect letter. Is that in your file, do you know?
I personally do not know what's in my file. I don't know. I don't know.
Is the board aware of a SHPO adverse effect letter?
I don't believe that there is such a letter.
Okay. And we don't believe there is either, so I believe that statement on the record a few moments ago was completely incorrect. I just want to make sure the record's clear on that. SHPO has not issued an adverse effect letter. In fact, SHPO issued a concurrence, and we included that concurrence back when we filed the application. It was after we filed the application that there was an effort to make the two buildings on the property nearby as eligible for listing, and they weren't made eligible until very recently. And since that time, in September, we revised the EAF to note that. We also submitted a report from EBI, from a Secretary of the Interior qualified historian, confirming the reasons why there would be no adverse effect on those properties that have been made eligible for listing. And it's really 3 reasons. So again, there were some misstatements. The letters, as confirmed in the letter that we just recently submitted back on October 25th from Saratoga, confirms all the distances are correct. The view shed map showed that I'll call them buildings that were made recently eligible for listing would not be visible based on the view shed mapping. We also produced actual sight lines to show that those buildings would not be visible. There's been no photographs to show that those buildings would be visible in the public record. If there is, please feel free to correct me. But more importantly, the qualified historian confirmed that irrespective of whether the tower would be visible or not visible, it simply would not have an adverse effect on those buildings based on the reason why those buildings were listed as eligible. And that's a very important point. Just because a property that's eligible for listing is within viewshed of something doesn't make it impacted by that particular use. Another thing I'd like to point out as far as corrections and incorrections, I'm not sure what the scale is on this map, but the tower that's shown on this map that alleges all these distances, I'm suspecting if the scale is correct, that tower would be about 2,000 feet tall. It's also designed with various whip antennas coming off of the top. That is clearly not what is being proposed. In fact, what's being proposed is a 140-foot monopine disguised as a tree. So again, even the visual renderings that we prepared eventually showed that. When we did the 6 balloon tests and the crane tests, we actually did it at 180 feet. So the tower was reduced 40 feet since the time some of those photographs that were mentioned earlier were submitted. But again, this document here is completely inaccurate and misleading to the board because it's showing a tower not only completely out of scale by probably tenfold, if not more, it's also showing a tower that's not anywhere near resembling what's being proposed. What we submitted since the last meeting, and we submitted this back at the end of September, was a letter from the DEC dated September 3rd, 2019, confirming that there are no freshwater wetland permits required. The application does not require any wetland permits from the state or from the federal government. We are in front of the Environmental Conservation Board for what we believe is an administrative permit or a finding that no permit's required for the utilities that are proposed under the existing gravel access drive. And in fact, the only other feature that's within the wetland buffer, when it's not a state wetland, it's a town wetland, is the stormwater management practice that we added as an accommodation to the neighbor. We're not making any changes to the road, but we did propose to put in some stormwater management practices to improve the existing condition that was complained of. That is completely independent and separate from the proposed application. As I mentioned, we submitted the revised EAF and the revised EAF addendum. We submitted a letter from Homeland Towers to the DEP dated September 16, 2019, confirming that based on the title documents that we submitted back in August to this board and now to the DEP, that there are no DEP permits required for access to the property. Irrespective of that, that wouldn't be an issue that would be relative to this board's decision-making authority. We submitted a letter from Mr. Raymond Vigatti dated September 11, 2019, confirming that the alternative location suggested by the Residents' Council was not available and not a feasible alternative. To my knowledge, there's not been one other single alternative site proposed or suggested. We believe we've looked at all the different sites that are in the area. Regarding the Peckham property, I'm sure you're aware, back in August, we submitted the map showing where Verizon Wireless is located. They're actually located at that property. You may recall you hired an independent professional engineer to review the application. He came, he spoke in front of this board, he answered many questions, he reviewed all the materials that we submitted. Just to reiterate, we submitted actual propagation mapping, we submitted actual scan test data of all the existing signal. We submitted drive test data at 3 different heights based on the crane test we provided and performed. We submitted what we call KPIs, key performance indicators, detailing the various aspects of both drop call data and access failure rate data. All of that was submitted to the board. All of that was reviewed by your third-party consultant, and Mr. Grafe did conclude in his report that we did prove the need for the height of the facility to provide the necessary coverage at this location. We submitted a supplemental letter from Lane Appraisals dated September 19, 2019, in response to the unsupported broker letters. Just to reiterate, the Lane Appraisal report was very simple. It looked at numerous studies over a long period of time, over a decade. It looked at towers specifically in the town of Carmel and in the surrounding counties. It looked at the pure data when a tower would be visible and when a tower would not be visible. And it looked at houses that had visibility of the tower and when it did not have visibility of the tower. And it compared the sales prices at that time. And in the data, it showed that there would not be a diminution in property values. I've heard many times throughout the meetings that we've stood up here and said that the tower is going to make property values go up. We did not say that, okay? We provided the raw, excuse me, if I may, thank you. We provided the raw data from an MAI certified appraiser. This is the same methodology that was held up in various cases. We cited to them in my letter. T-Mobile versus Ramapo. Southern District of New York found the planning board's conclusion that the tower would lower property values was almost entirely conclusory in contrast to the comparative sales analysis submitted by T-Mobile. That was the same analysis or a very similar analysis from Lane Appraisals. Sprint v. Sestone, that's out of the town of Phillipstown, again, Southern District of New York. The Southern District Court held generalized concerns about potential decrease in property values stemming from the construction of the proposed communication antenna, especially in light of the expert reports contained in the record before the court, are not adequate to support the conclusion that a special permit be denied. Again, it was a Lane Appraisal report and the same methodology as in this case. 2 other cases. Again, a case out of federal court out of the town of East Fishkill, again, based on a Lane Appraisal report, overturned a board's denial of a special permit. State courts have held the same, both in the town of Kent, Bruin versus the town of Kent, and Lindenthal versus Homeland Towers, town of Newcastle, and New York SMSA Limited Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless, upheld 2 different boards' approvals in part based on the Lane Appraisal methodology and reports. We submitted another follow-up report from PureCon Solutions dated September 24th, 2019, regarding Verizon Wireless's significant gap in service. We've detailed that earlier. We reiterated the number of users, the different uses in the area, including based on what would be the most conservative analysis, which is the 700 frequency band. We showed the hundreds and hundreds of residents that would not be covered by the existing service. We also detailed the issues regarding the propagation maps, the drive test data, and the KPI data, as well as the online coverage maps. That's all in the PureCon report. We submitted a letter from APT Engineering detailing there will be no significant adverse impacts related to fire dangers. As included in that letter was the minimal amount of welding that would be required. We indicated what we would do in those circumstances. We indicated the ordinances that are in place to protect against any fire danger. We referred the application to the local fire department. We received no adverse comments back from them. And we also detailed that the turning radius, as shown on the site plan previously, it's been in front of this board for many, many months, is adequate for emergency service personnel. The facility meets all the zoning code setback requirements. And we also noted that there was a letter submitted from a Mr. Dennis Rogers dated March 28th, 2013. If that date sounds unusual, it's because it is. It was in Mr. Campanelli's memo. That was the same letter that was submitted in the town of Kent case that I mentioned before, where the court upheld the approval of that facility. We responded to that letter notifying the board that the Rogers letter was completely inaccurate had the wrong wind loading, the wrong size antennas. All of the assumptions in the report were incorrect, and we submitted a report from Tectonic Engineering showing that all of those assumptions were incorrect and that there would be no adverse impact from ice fall. I mentioned the EBI letter before. That's dated September 17th, 2019. We also submitted another letter from Saratoga Associates dated September 27th, 2019. This included additional visual renderings and sight lines from nearby properties. There were a lot of comments at the last meeting about visibility from backyards and pools and so forth and so on. We submitted the visual rendering showing the limited visibility, the way the proposed monopine would blend in with the existing coniferous trees, and we also showed the sight line showing that the various structures that were recently made eligible for listing would not be visible from the proposed facility. We submitted the APT engineering letter dated September 17th, 2019, detailing all the site plan changes requested by the ECB, and we submitted the revised site plan based on those ECB comments. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. 2 minutes?
Yes, please. Very briefly, with regard to the lane appraisal, some of the statements made by Mr. Gordioso are clearly not accurate. He's referred to the Kent case as somehow supporting his lane appraisal analysis. No court ever made any decision regarding the lane appraisal in the town of Kent case that I handled. His argument with regard to the lane appraisal is really pretty simple. They claim that they looked at the value of homes which were similarly situated, some of which had a view of a cell tower and others didn't, and said basically they sell for the same square price per foot. The problem that omits is what else was involved in the valuation of the home. Clearly a home which is updated and has central air and a fireplace, which has a view, might sell for the same square footage as a house that doesn't have a view but doesn't have any of those amenities, or a built-in pool or things like that. So it really doesn't show anything. The cases he cited as far as saying the lane appraisal was good were all lower court cases. The case I cited in my brief is OmniPoint, and OmniPoint says you don't have to have an appraisal. Real estate brokers' letters are substantial evidence of a reduction in property values, and that case came from the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. The only court higher than that is the United States Supreme Court, and that decision in OmniPoint has stood since 2005, and it's never been overturned. So he can say whatever he wants about the lane report, but according to the Court of Appeals, those letters from brokers are some significant evidence. Apart from that, again, I want to point out for the record what he has not provided, and it's very simple. He can provide what was done in on Hickory Lane in Bedford. An appraiser there prepared appraisals for the nearby properties. They prepared 2 sets of appraisals, one without the tower, and then they created appraisals for the homes, the exact same homes of what they would be worth with the tower there. And not surprisingly, every single home, the value of each of them was reduced collectively by millions of dollars. This applicant has not given you that. In similar fashion, they haven't still, to this day, given you the hard data. They've given you manipulated data, but not hard data. They talk about dropped call data. Read the PureCon Solution report. There is no hard data. They discuss receiving engineering, unspecified engineering data from Verizon, but they don't give you the actual data. They don't give you dropped call records. In similar vein, they give you maps, which are creations using software which are manipulated. They introduce variables. They take actual signal strengths and they multiply them by fractions to reduce the signal strengths. They don't give you the actual signal strengths. It's nowhere. They can do it, but they haven't. Thank you very much for your time.
If I may. Mr. Campanelli is correct on one point. He did represent the residents in the Bruin case, and the residents lost in that case. The court, both the lower court and the appeals court, the appellate division upheld the lower court. And in the lower court, it specifically referenced the lane appraisal, the fact that there was an appraisal report. The lane appraisal report was the same methodology as every report cited in each of the 5 cases. The T-Mobile case he cited, there was no lane appraisal report. Okay? And in the cases that I cited specifically talked about the fact that when you have a broker letter that has no data, and the broker letters have no data. Their opinions, their speculation, okay, but there's absolutely no data. And that's what the court's focused on, whereas the lane appraisal's report has the actual data. I'm not sure which report he's referring to, but if it was so simple to prepare a report that he suggested, I'm certain he would have, but he didn't submit that. The board has to be confined by the evidence on the record. The board has to be confined in making its decision based on substantial evidence in the record under federal law. We've submitted the data. We've submitted all the data that you requested. We've submitted all of the data that's required by your code. We've submitted all of the data that was requested by your third-party professional engineer. And he came to the conclusion that we substantiated the need for the facility. There is no data in the record other than that data regarding the need for the facility. Thank you very much. I'd ask you to close the hearing tonight and approve the application. Thank you.
Anyone else want to be heard?
One quick thing. I just think the Telecommunications Act that the town enacted several years ago, I think that should be your Bible. That should be what you make a decision on, and whether they complied with it or they didn't, with the hierarchy, and I'm not going to go through everything because you guys are well aware of what's in there, so I'm not going to preach to you with all due respect. And with regard to this map that Mr. Gordillo brought up, I actually did that map about 6 months ago, and he is correct. So for the record, I don't think anybody was trying to pull the wool over your eye. That cell tower was just placed there. That map is simply a distance to the cell tower from 11 different areas, so everybody had an idea how far the cell tower was to their house. Nobody said that cell tower was to scale, and we don't want you to think we was trying to pull the wool over your eyes. That was simply a distance to the cell tower map, okay?
Thank you, Bob. Can we get a, any other comments before I close the public hearing?
It's Gail Fiero again. That was very true, what Bob was saying about this. If I was trying to put something over on somebody, I wouldn't put a thing out in the public like this. It's just to show, this shows that my house is number 11 on here, which is, I am 497 feet from the tower. This historical, the two properties are 704 feet and, they're 704 feet, and the other one is even less because it's back further. And they, they say 1,400 feet, which the one that they were giving us, and putting that out as, I call it smoke and mirrors. And also like I said, were there any hardships documented? That's a law. They have to deal, and I forget the other name of the person on Dixon. I don't think they sent any documents of hardship. And also one other thing, because I know the fact that our two properties are going to be listed, it's just a little matter of time. And Mr. Gordioso tries to always make it a point that they're not listed, they're eligible for listing. Well, I'm in contact with Mr. Krattinger from the Historical Society, been to the property, he's working this through, and it is like the Hill Agor property. Tom Maxon got in touch with me. He's a historian. And he said he's been following our case, and he told me it's the same circumstance as the Hill Agor property, and that's never been officially on their records. So, and I know Mr. Gordioso always said it was never the same thing. But, so that's it. We're just telling the truth in this whole case with no smoke and mirrors. So I have it all on here, which anybody wants to look at it.
Thank you.
So regarding the comment about the code being the Bible, actually the federal law does supersede the code. But to the extent the code is relevant, I think think this map is very important. The code that was relatively recently adopted has a residential home setback requirement. It's 2 times the height of the tower. We meet that requirement. Excuse me, we meet that requirement. We meet that requirement by a wide margin. In addition to that, the code that was recently adopted has no setback requirement for buildings or structures that are eligible for listing or listed. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last comments before I close the public hearing? Can I get Anthony?
Mr. Chairman, being there's no further public comment, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out and listening and talking tonight and giving us your comments. Discussion on the board. I'd like to hear what you folks have to say.
So I've carefully reviewed the draft resolution that the board will be acting on tonight, and I find that I am in full agreement with it. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've carefully reviewed the draft resolution that the board will be acting on tonight, and I find that I am in full agreement with it. Not to diminish any of the conclusions that are in that resolution, I want to highlight a few things. I am disturbed about the visual impact in light of the strong statements and pictures given by homeowners. On the issue of the effect on real estate valuations, I reviewed Homeland's lane report materials. I also reviewed the broker letters supplied by Mr. Campanelli, and I find the broker letters to be more persuasive. On the issue of the historical property, I note that there are contradictions in Homeland's materials about the visual impact. In one location, those materials show that that the tower will be visible when leaves are not on the trees, and what will be visible will be a substantial part of the cell tower. Understanding the amount of months that leaves are not on the trees, I find that a substantial impact. That's it.
Thank you. Kim, do you have any comments?
I do. Based on the documents that we have before us as a board, can you hear me?
Yes.
I too have read through our documentation, and based on facts that were supplied by homeowners, residents, I find it appalling that that these residents are being visually impacted. Eleanor Drive, immediately on Sheer Hill. I myself, the day of the crane test, went to the site, visited a couple of sites, Stacy Lane, and can see for myself the impact that it has on the residents. Immediately, residents that are adjacent to this property or share this property, a resident who lives in a 1700s home who is going to be visually impacted by this every single day. The people that live behind it on Stacy are going to see this every single day. When they bought their homes, this was not what they had intentions of. And I find it unfair that they will have to see this. So to those aspects, I'm denying this application.
Anthony?
We've had many meetings about this, going back and forth. We've heard all sides. We've heard all sides, and ultimately, this board represents the people of this town. And this subject and these cell towers inevitably will affect the people in this town adversely, in my opinion. I understand there is a need for technology. I understand there is other options, which I don't think there's been a good compromise here, or an offering of a compromise. Based on everything that we've talked about, visual impact, property values, potential historical sites, which I would err to the side of caution, I am not in favor of this as well.
Ray?
I have a few more comments. The first point that I'd like to make is that I've also reviewed the draft resolution, and I do agree with every single point raised in the resolution, which I'll be voting on later. I'd like to state right off the bat that based on the zoning board's decision, as well as, my own analysis, the application does not conform with the Town Code 156-62, Section O. I also do not believe that the applicant has satisfied their burden as set forth in 156-62, Section I. Okay, the code says that the applicant must come forward with a detailed explanation to provide why a site of higher priority was not selected. To be quite frank, the applicant came to us with a site selected, and I don't believe I've ever heard any explanation why other sites were not equally as viable. I can think of other sites in the areas which would be perhaps better, or another location, but that's enough about that. The two areas that the other members touched on, which I want to touch on, the visual impact as well as the diminution of or potential diminution of value of the properties. So the applicant submitted an adverse visual impact study, which was comprised of photographs taken mostly from public roads and public areas. What's noticeably missing is any sort of photographs that from the properties that would be most affected by this, including the property owner who is going to be at the base of this monstrosity on Croton Falls Road. I think that it wouldn't have been a stretch for the applicant to ask for permission to go on properties. Maybe they wouldn't be granted, maybe they would, but to take pictures to truly get an assessment of what the visual impact was. We did have pictures submitted from council, two of which are pretty striking. They appear to be on a back deck. There's a pool cover but you could see the crane test and the balloon test is right there. I mean, the visual impact is crystal clear in that. But beyond that, when the crane test was done, I went in my car and I rode around both times. When you go up those streets, especially around the area, it is very visible. There's no doubt about it. The other caveat is that after the site was moved on the Crane Road location, there was never a subsequent balloon test done to show that the new position was not, the impact of the new position. I just note that. But significantly, I take exception with the report submitted by Lane Appraisals. He concludes in his report, and I'm quoting here, that the tower will not result in diminution of property values or reduce marketability of the properties. I take exception with that. He puts 4 data points in his report: sale price, sale date, area, and the square foot price. It's woefully inadequate. It doesn't take into account a lot of factors which really should be taken into account. Age of the house, the amenities, the type of house, a raised ranch versus a center hall colonial, size of the property that the house is on. Up here in Mayapack, you have houses that are on 1/4 of an acre, houses on 1/2 an acre. I'm on 1.5 acres, and now the new zoning is 3 acres. That's a big impact on the price. Doesn't tell us what the purchase price was versus the sale price. We have the sale price, but we don't know what the purchase price was. We don't know how long the house was on the market. Was the house on the market for 2 years because it has it views the cell tower? We don't know these things. So for me, the Lane appraisal doesn't really tell us much. Now, having said that, I did do a little Google research, and I saw lane appraisals for Phillipstown and other places. And there are varying amounts of detail. Some of them had prices of the house that it was purchased for versus ours. The report we got from Lane Appraisal versus the ones I found online, minimal. We got very little information in the report. Now, contrasting that with the letters that we received from real estate agents, we're dealing with people who, some 35 years, and they're telling us their opinion based on their 35 years of experience, that they do realize that this is going to be something that's going to be an adverse impact on selling the house, okay? I don't really, it's not a stretch of the imagination to understand what the person is saying. As a person looking to buy a house, would I want to buy a house next to a cell tower? I don't think so. I don't think so. And I just think it, I just think it defies common sense to look at the Lane report and accept it without questioning at least the things that I questioned. But I'm guided by 156-62, where the legislative intent is pretty clear. It's about preserving the character of the community, minimize the aesthetic impacts, and realizing that the residential area is of paramount importance. And for all of those reasons, I'm going to be joining some of my colleagues in denying the application.
Mark?
Being I'm the newest member of the board, I was not around for a lot of these meetings. I was not able to see the balloons fly, but I did see a lot of the pictures, which does have a significant impact on these homes. I do agree with this resolution and the items in it. And for me to go on, I think the board members covered pretty much all the concerns that we all have.
So I feel personally this is going to have a huge negative effect on the community whom we're here representing. And I just think there's got to be better alternatives, working with us and working with the community. It just conflicts very much so with our town code, whether it's the aesthetics or height or trying to find a commercial location. And I'm personally not really sold on a drop call coverage. You know, I've driven up and down Croton Falls Road plenty of times, and personally, I haven't lost a call, but I'd rather lose a call for 30 seconds and wake up in the morning and look at that being said, everything I've heard tonight I happen to support. And Anthony, would you mind reading in the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Having read the resolution and being in full agreement, I'd like to offer the resolution of the Planning Board of the Town of Carmel, number 19-13, October 30th, 2019, tax map number 65.19-1-43, Homeland Towers LLC and Verizon Wireless, 254 Croton Falls Road, site plan and special permit denial.
I'd like to take a roll call.
I need to second it.
Do we have a
Yeah,
second?
I'd like to second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mark, I'd like to start off with you since you're the newest member.
I'm in favor of the resolution.
Bob?
I'm in favor of the resolution.
Kim?
I'm in favor.
Anthony?
For the motion.
For the motion.
For the motion.
Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you. Next on the agenda,
36 Dixon.
36 Dixon Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Same appearance, Robert Gaudioso, law firm Snyder & Snyder, on behalf of the applicants. Just as a matter of housekeeping, there was a mention of some independent research. Was that placed into the record?
No, I didn't. It was just things I looked on the internet that are available to anybody.
Okay, so just for the record, the research you did was not placed into the record?
No, it was not.
Okay. Thank
So this is
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also go through my presentation first, if that would be okay to answer.
but this is a public hearing. I want to hear from the public first, and I'll turn it over to yourself.
So if I can just reserve my right to discuss the materials that we've submitted.
Sure. As I mentioned, this is a public hearing for Homeland Towers, Dixon Lake, 36 Dixon Road. Anybody wish to be heard tonight, preferably with something that we have not heard already? If there is something you want to stress, please feel free to get up and discuss. Robert?
Robert Montanaro, 30 Brittany Lane. First of all, thank you to the board for again hearing us. And I thank you to all the folks that are here tonight in support, as well as the folks that couldn't be here tonight. I'll briefly summarize our major points. Our first point is that we do not feel that this tower on Dixon Road has been proven to even be in need. There is clearly a shadow of doubt, whether it be from the information that's been submitted and casting doubt on whether or not this tower is even needed. Secondly, again, I do agree, common sense dictates people would not be out here if they didn't have a common sense gut instinct that putting a cell tower up a few hundred feet from their home or several hundred feet from their home would not clearly have a negative impact. And in going to local realtors who have decades of experience, again, we've already documented, and it goes in contradiction to what's been supplied by Homeland, and it shows that that negative impact is in millions of dollars. And as far as aesthetic impact is concerned and the perception of people, whether they're in their backyard, their living room, or their deck, I'm not quite sure how you would contradict that. That's exactly what people would be looking at, and that aesthetic impact is severe to people. The amount of taxes that people pay, you could verify that by walking across the hall, and we've documented that in full support of this group that has spent a lot of time and effort in getting our views across. Lastly, in regards to alternate sites on the Dixon Road site, the Spaccarelli property, it's clearly been shown that there are alternate sites, again, if a tower is even needed, that should be further explored. And there's further communication that we viewed online between the town and Homeland, where these alternate sites were even looked at. Whether that ball got dropped because of cost or convenience, we have no idea. But again, the tower has not even been proven to be in need. And we've documented that alternate sites that would have a significantly less impact should be explored further, if in fact it's ever even proven that a tower is needed. I could tell you that putting up this tower several hundred feet from my home would clearly not only have an impact, but I don't have any dropped calls either. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public want to be heard? Please.
Andrew Campanelli, Campanelli Associates. Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. There are just a few things I want to discuss very, very briefly. With regard to this application, it is critical to me, again, to create a proper record. Mr. Gaudioso works very hard to create a record to make sure he protects his record. And I think it's important that I mention what needs to be done for the sake of my clients. The board, as I mentioned previously, really needs to make certain factual determinations. I didn't mention on the last case, but I will mention here. Within the exhibits that have been submitted to the board, I've submitted data maps directly from Verizon. In this case, it was Exhibit L next to the memorandum, which showed that according to Verizon, there was no and are no significant gaps in personal wireless services and no capacity deficiencies in the precise location where they want to build this tower. Now, in response, Mr. Gaudio tries to minimize that display by claiming in some way that this is really a marketing tool, that somehow Verizon is essentially misleading or lying to the public, basically.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I never said any of those.
I didn't interrupt you, sir.
I never said any of those.
I'll give you an opportunity. Oh, everybody, please quiet. Mr. Guadios, I'll give you the microphone in a minute. Please don't speak up like that.
I apologize. Thank you. I've heard Mr. Gaudioso and other members of his firm repeatedly say, oh, those are just for marketing materials. The importance of the maps that I've submitted for both this case and the other case is that What Verizon is showing you is that there are no significant gaps in their personal wireless service at the specific location. That is a critical term. Verizon is not representing this perfect service, and I'm not arguing that this town has perfect service for Verizon. What I'm telling you is Verizon has no significant gaps which requires that this application be granted. And it is critical that among the factual determinations you make, you comply with the Telecommunications Act. Mr. Gaudioso said the act trumps the code. He's right. He knows what he's talking about with regard to this issue. And here's the key issue. Even if an application violates your code, you must grant it if Mr. Gaudioso proves that Verizon suffers from a significant gap in its personal wireless service, and the proposed installation is the least intrusive means of remedying that gap. So it is critical that among the findings you make, in addition to whether or not there's a significant adverse impact on aesthetics or property value, or if it complies with your code, it is extremely important that the board make a determination as to whether or not this applicant has established, number one, that there is a significant gap in service which requires this tower, and even if there is, whether or not this is the least intrusive means of remedying that gap. Now, in this particular application, there is no way Mr. Gaudioso can prove that. There is absolutely nothing which requires a tower to be placed 50 feet from an adjacent residential parcel on a parcel as large as this. It's more than 10 acres. There's absolutely no reason to do that. But it is critical that this board make those factual determinations in both cases. So I ask that the board consider making a determination as to whether or not Mr. Gaudioso has established, contrary to what Verizon says, that Verizon has a significant gap in service in each of these locations, and that the proposed installation is the least intrusive means. Because if you find as a factual determination that he hasn't met either of those standards, then the Telecommunications Act does not require you to grant the application. Thank you.
Mr. Gaudioso.
So back at the end of September, we submitted some additional information. I'm not sure if the board's had an opportunity to take a look at it. We submitted a letter from SHPO concurring with the fact that there are no historic properties in the area and potential effects. We submitted letters from both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Department of Environmental Conservation regarding endangered and threatened species, including a letter from EBI confirming no adverse impacts to eagles. We submitted a letter from Mr. Klaus Wimmer dated September 17th, 2019, confirming that the only 6 alternative sites that were suggested were not feasible alternative locations, and they were not available for the installation of the facility. We also submitted a letter from Mr. Klaus Wimmer dated August 21st, 2019, confirming that the town properties were not available. And I've heard some statements that for some reason the town properties were available. We specifically included a copy of the correspondence from the town attorney confirming McDonough Park was not available. We actually had site visits. We actually proposed lease agreements. We spent money. We drew up plans, and the town decided it was not going to lease that property. So the statements about the fact that it would be cheaper or more expensive for us or what have you are completely incorrect. Regarding the lane appraisal report, I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier, but it's in my letter. I find it shameful that tonight, for the first time on the night before the shot clock is supposed to expire, there are questions about the methodology in the lane appraisal report, and that there was independent research that wasn't placed into the record, and that the board months ago resolved to hire a third-party appraiser. And I have not seen that review at all in the record. And yet there are questions and reliance on our report versus the broker reports. I find that prejudicial and unfair to the applicant. Regarding the balloon test, same comment. Again, prejudicial to stay at this stage. Why didn't we take photographs from certain places? Let me remind the board, I stood here on multiple occasions and requested the board schedule the public hearing. We provided viewshed maps with proposed visual rendering locations. We asked for all the locations the board, the public, and the staff wanted us to take photographs from. We took photographs from every single location that was requested. So to hear that we didn't take photographs from certain places because we were trying to conceal data is nothing further than the truth. That is absolutely ridiculous. And it's prejudicial to the applicant that we stood here for months and asked for the public hearing to be set. And we worked with the board, and we had special meetings, and we extended the shot clock to be able to do the 6 balloon tests and the crane test. And we hear tonight that there were photographs that we didn't take. Again, I find that prejudicial. We submitted a response from PureCon Solutions dated September 23rd, 2019. Again, this reiterated the significant gap in service, reiterated the online marketing maps. I didn't make these statements. PureCon, the expert, made these statements, explaining the difference between the online maps and the maps that were submitted, explaining the difference between the propagation maps, the drive test maps, and the KPI data. But you heard from one of your own residents, I believe it was Mr. O'Leary, stood here and talked about how he had all the different carriers and he had problems with service. So to say that there's no service, so to say that there's no service because one person doesn't want to make a call or doesn't care if they don't have a call, that's not the standard. That's not the federal law standard. And we detailed that, and there's no evidence in the record otherwise. Again, we submitted a letter from APT Engineering detailing no significant adverse impacts regarding fire dangers. We referred the application to the fire department. We received no adverse comments. Again, the application meets the setbacks. There's been comments about the setback to the property line. Yes, that meets the town code, the recently enacted the town code. If the setback should have been bigger, that was up for the town code to adopt. We meet the setbacks. Nevertheless, we proposed many months ago an alternative location much further, all the way on the other side of the property. So again, to say that there were no alternatives and that we didn't propose any alternatives, we did. And we showed visual renderings from that alternative. We also submitted a sketch plan with respect to that, and we also submitted a freshwater wetland survey showing where the wetlands are on the property and the fact that we're not impacting them. With that, I'd ask you to close the hearing and approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to respond to the umbrage exhibited or stated by Mr. Gaudioso, complaining that your actions are prejudicial in mentioning that there weren't photographs taken from the closest property, the property that's directly adjacent to where the tower's going. Contrary to what Mr. Gaudioso is stating, I respectfully submit it's not your job to tell him where to take photos. He knows what his job is, and he knows where he's supposed to take the photos from. And I want to make the record crystal clear. I've cited OmniPoint. In OmniPoint, which was decided by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit in 2005, 14 years ago, a federal judge said that the board, in a case similar to this, could completely discount the study that was offered by the applicant. And the reason is, the photographs taken by the applicant were taken, just as they are here, from public roads. No photographs were taken from the homes that would be most adversely impacted. This comes as no surprise to Mr. Gaudioso, and the reason is, I've probably been up against him countless times. I can't tell you how many. But in at least a dozen cases, at least a dozen in the past year, I've submitted briefs. And in those briefs, opposing Mr. Gaudioso's applications, I laid out case after case and explained time and time again that according to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, the applicant should take photos from the nearby homes. They choose not to do so. So for this applicant to stand here and tell him that he's aghast and it's prejudicial to his client that a member of this board would have the audacity to suggest that he should have done something that the federal court has said should be done 14 years ago, that's prejudicial, that's absurd. There's no grounds for that statement, and he knows it. It's his obligation to provide this board with an accurate depiction of what it's going to look like. The whole purpose of a visual analysis is to give you an accurate depiction, to show you exactly what the adverse impact is going to look like. They didn't do it here, and it wasn't an omission by error. They don't do it in case after case, and they know they're supposed to. So any umbrage I submit to you is disingenuous at best. Thank you.
That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. First of all, we took photographs directly in front of the closest residents from the street. We were not authorized to go on their property. If we were authorized to go on their property and invited, we would have taken the photographs. The only thing that Mr. Campanelli is right about is he writes the same brief every time, and we've seen it many times. But unfortunately for him, that's not what the OmniPoint case said, okay? It didn't say you have to take photographs from the neighboring properties. We provided an expert report from Saratoga Associates based on the methodology we discussed with this board, with your planner, all the photographs, all the locations required by your code, every single location we took that we were requested to take, every single location that gave a fair and accurate representation of what the facility would look like from throughout the entire area, not just one backyard or one particular viewpoint. We included the view shed mapping, which is part of that analysis. We included the crane test, the 6 balloon tests, and the photographs. It's all one package. You can't look at one particular location and say, there'll be visibility from that location, and therefore, there's an adverse impact, and therefore, we have to deny the application. That's simply not the standard. And in fact, in the Saratoga report, it details the standard. The standard is not visibility. Even startling visibility, according to the DEC, is not an adverse visual impact. Okay? It has to be an impact more than that. It's not simply visibility. So 1 or 2 photos, or 6 photos, or 12 photos from this location or that location does not make a visual analysis. We submitted a complete visual analysis in accordance with the DEC manual for preparing such visual analyses. And those were the photographs, those were the view shed maps, that was the analysis that we performed hand in glove with the board and its planner to prepare that analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. At the microphone, please.
So Mr. Guardiola, this is Robert Montanaro. Mr. Guardiola didn't mention me by name, but he took photographs. I saw a couple of photographs from Brittany Lane, but for the record, at no time did Mr. Guardioso or anyone from Homeland knock on my door. Bobby Haley is here. I don't believe anybody knocked on his door. Mr. Gambino is here with his wife. I don't believe anyone knocked on his door. Renee is here. Don't believe anyone knocked on his door. So for the record, since he mentioned me, not by name, no one asked for authorization. I would have gladly taken him for a walk and let him take whatever photographs he wanted.
Thank you.
Very much.
If there are no other comments, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to hear from the board. Bob, would you mind, your
Sure.
opinion?
Yeah, I guess my comments are going to be duplicative of my earlier statements. With respect to the Dixon Road application, I've carefully reviewed. With respect to the Dixon Road application, I've carefully reviewed the draft resolution that the board will be acting on tonight, and I find that I am in full agreement with it. Not to diminish any of the conclusions in the resolutions, I want to highlight a few things. Here, too, I am disturbed about the visual impact in light of the strong statements and pictures given by the homeowners. On the issue of the effect on real estate valuations, here, too, I reviewed Homeland's lane report materials. I also reviewed the broker letters in Mr. Campanelli's materials, and I find the broker letters to be more persuasive. There is one other issue I want to mention. Homeland, relatively late in the game, moved the tower to the center of the property, but no balloon test was done for that move, and that balloon test would have allowed homeowners to evaluate the effect of the visual impact, and that has not been done. That's all I have.
Kim?
So I too, as in the first application, I'm denying this application based on some of the facts that we have seen and heard. Mr. Montanaro, sorry if I mispronounced your name, already jumped ahead of what I was going to say, which was, I'm sure that as you see, all of these residents here would have easily opened their door knowing that this is such a concern to them. And I think it was negligent on your part to not give that opportunity to them, to ask these residents, the surrounding residents at least, to take pictures, to enter their area and see what visual impacts it has. And as our code states, this is a negative impact for them. They have to live with this, and I don't think that that is just for them. I spend a lot of time in that area. I spend probably 75% of my time at McDonough Park, and I've never had any issues with drop calls. So I can't understand how this tower is possibly necessary if I don't have any issues with my own drop calls. That's all I have.
Anthony?
Mr. Chairman, for the reasons that we have stated in our resolution and for the discussions we've had back and forth on this, again, I'm going to reiterate that I'm not in favor based on this, which I feel is a strong negative impact to our community and to the people that live in this area. So therefore, I am not in favor of this application.
Ray?
For all the reasons I mentioned previously, including the applicant doesn't comply with 156-62O, the applicant failed to establish the priority pursuant to 156-62I, the adverse visual impact. I'm sorry, Mr. Gordioso, but it's your responsibility to take the pictures. You can blame me for pointing that out, but we had, a member of the community stand here and saying, nobody knocked on their door. So,
That's not the standard.
I'm not saying it's the standard.
That's not the standard.
I'm not saying it's the standard.
Everyone, we noticed those balloon tests and that crane test. We noticed those
Sir.
for months. We did them on dates so that everyone would have a fair opportunity. Everyone knew about that. So that's completely
All right,
unfair. So that's
Ray does have the
completely
floor right now.
unfair. But if he's gonna point at me.
You can get back up. Ray has the floor
that's
right now.
unfair.
With all due respect, you pointed at me when you said that I was injecting some, I forget how you put it, but a standard or something about taking pictures. So the reality is that my comment was quite simple. The pictures we were giving were taken from public roads, none from the properties that were most affected by it. That's the point I made, very simple, okay? I stand by that point, period. And as far as the evaluation goes, I stand by my point again. You gave us a report, the lane appraisal. It had 4 criteria points that were used. I think there's a lot more information that would have been helpful if you were trying to show that the property, there were no diminution in value. I'm not persuaded by the report you gave me. I don't believe the report bears out the point that you're trying to make. I am persuaded by the letters from the realtors, people who are in the trenches selling houses, people who for some 35 years know what's involved in selling a house versus appraising it, okay? And having said that, I'm not even sure that the appraisal was proper because of the variables I mentioned previously, such as the size of the property, the type of house it is, the amenities, and so on and so forth, okay? And for those reasons, and again, the draft resolution, I've reviewed it, I agree with every point in the draft resolution, and for those reasons, I'll be voting no.
Mark?
Again, being the newest member of the board, I did not have as much time involved in this as the rest of the members. I did review a lot of the documents. I was not present for the balloon test, even though I do live in the area. I was not informed about those. I do agree with the resolution, and especially what Ray said about the appraisal and the impact that it could have on the community. So I'm in agreement with this resolution, and I'm leave it at that.
Thank you. So I actually visited both sites for both balloon tests. I'm sure most of the board, if not all the board members did. My opinion is I found the balloon testing on the Dixon Road area to be very difficult to swallow. I just thought it was extremely intrusive. That's the really thing that sticks with me. I can still visualize it after all this time. So I also support everything that we just heard. I'd also just like to take an opportunity to thank the neighbors for conducting themselves so professionally through all these meetings. I know it's a very stressful topic, and I thank you for that, for your behavior. Anthony, would you like to make a resolution?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, having read and being in agreement with the resolution, I'd like to offer the resolution of the Planning Board of the Town of Carmel, number 19-14, October 30th, 2019, tax map number 54.1-16, Homeland Towers LLC and Verizon Wireless 36 Dixon Road, site plan and special permit denial. Need a second?
I'll second the motion.
I need to do a roll call now. We're going to stay in the same order. Mark?
I'm for the resolution.
Bob?
For the resolution?
Kim?
For the resolution.
Anthony?
For the motion.
Ray?
For the motion.
I, too, am for the motion.
Thank you very much for your time throughout the process. If we could just respectfully obtain a copy of the resolutions that were adopted tonight, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, we have some minutes, I believe. Did anyone get a chance to read the minutes? If so, can we
I
have a
did.
motion on them?
I read the minutes and I found them fine.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion adjourned?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.